Hi, and welcome to Shot of Justice.
Chapter 1. The Screech That Changed Everything. The scent of lavender sachets, carefully tucked into her handbag that morning, was obliterated in an instant. One moment, Ilara Henderson was humming along to a gentle classical piece on the radio, the late afternoon sun warming her hands on the steering wheel as she drove home from the library. The next, the world exploded in a cacophony of sound and violence. A monstrous chrome grille filled her driver's side window, impossibly close. A horn blared, not a warning, but a furious, startled scream. Her own scream was swallowed by the terrifying, high-pitched shriek of tires fighting asphalt. Her hands, arthritic knuckles whitening, yanked the wheel instinctively, uselessly. The impact was a brutal punch to the ribs, a sickening lurch that slammed her head against the side window with a crack that echoed in her skull. Glass rained down like jagged diamonds. The airbag deployed with a deafening whoomph, smelling of acrid chemicals and panic, smashing into her chest, stealing her breath. Silence. Thick, disorienting, broken only by the frantic tick-tick-tick of her own cooling engine and a strange, high-pitched ringing in her ears. Dust motes danced in the fractured sunlight, slanting through the cracked windshield. Pain, sharp and insistent, bloomed in her left shoulder, radiated down her arm. Her neck felt stiff, wrong. A metallic taste flooded her mouth. Blood, she realized dimly, from where she'd bitten her lip. Through the spider-webbed glass of the passenger window, she saw it. A hulking, midnight black pickup truck, absurdly large and aggressive-looking, had angled sharply in front of her small, sensible sedan, cutting her off with inches to spare. Its rear bumper was crumpled against her front fender, a grotesque kiss of metal. The driver's door of the truck flew open. He unfolded himself from the cab, not a man, a presence. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a dark T-shirt stretched tight over a muscular chest. His face was obscured by mirrored sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, but the set of his jaw was visible, clenched in annoyance rather than concern. He slammed his door shut with unnecessary force, the sound jarring in the fragile quiet. He didn't look towards her car, not immediately. Instead, he stalked to the point of impact, running a hand over the minor dent on his pristine truck's bumper. His sigh was audible even from inside Ilara's wrecked car, a sound of profound irritation. He cut me off. The thought pierced the fog of shock and pain, sharp and clear. He just pulled right out in front of me. Didn't even signal. The memory replayed in horrifying slow motion. The truck accelerating aggressively from the side street, ignoring the yield sign, forcing its way into her lane with arrogant disregard. Her foot had stamped on the brake, but it was too late, the distance too small. He finally deigned to look at her car. His gaze swept over the buckled hood, the shattered headlight, the driver's side caved in where she'd instinctively swerved away from him, colliding instead with a sturdy lamppost. His eyes, visible now as he pushed his sunglasses onto his head, were cold, assessing damage, not injury. They flickered towards the driver's seat, met Ilara's wide, terrified eyes through the cracked glass. There was no apology there. No shock. Just a flat, impatient look, like she was an inconvenient pothole he'd hit. "Hey!" His voice was a harsh bark, startlingly loud. "You okay in there?" Ilara tried to speak. Her throat felt raw, constricted. A whimper escaped instead. She fumbled for the seatbelt release, her fingers numb and clumsy. Pain lanced through her shoulder again, making her gasp. The smell of leaking coolant mixed with the airbag dust, nauseating. He didn't move to help. He stood there, hands on his hips, radiating impatience. "Damn woman drivers," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear through the broken window. "Probably texting." The words landed like a physical blow, colder than the shock, sharper than the glass. Rage, sudden and pure, cut through the pain and fear. It wasn't just the accident. It was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of responsibility. The dismissal. Ilara Henderson, age 68, retired librarian, lover of quiet gardens and complex crossword puzzles, felt something unfamiliar and dangerous ignite deep within her bruised chest. It wasn't a flame, it was a shard of ice, crystalline and lethal. This man, this arrogant brute in his ridiculous metal monster, had shattered her afternoon, possibly her body, and now dared to blame her. She found her voice. It emerged raspy, trembling, but clear. Call. 911. She locked eyes with him, refusing to look away despite the pain, despite the fear. Now. He blinked, momentarily taken aback by the steel in the voice of the crumpled woman in the wrecked car. He hesitated, then pulled out a phone, his movements grudging. He turned his back on her, speaking tersely into the device. Ilara closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the headrest. The pain was intensifying, a throbbing ache in her shoulder, a sharp sting on her temple. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. But beneath the pain and the fear, that icy shard remained. It wasn't just about the medical bills, the insurance hassles, the potential long-term damage to her beloved car. It was about the insult, the sheer, unadulterated unfairness of it. As the red and blue lights painted the interior of her car in frantic strobes, Ilara Henderson made a silent vow. He thought he could just drive away, blame her, treat her like an inconvenient bug on his windshield. This man, this truckman, as she already thought of him, would learn that some bugs have very sharp stings. He had no idea who he'd just messed with. Sweet revenge, she decided, wouldn't be loud or violent. It would be cold, precise, and utterly devastating. And she would savor every single deliberate moment of it. Chapter 2. The Aftermath and the Seed. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and prodding hands. X-rays revealed a fractured clavicle, the collarbone, and severe whiplash. Bruises bloomed across her chest and ribs like dark, painful flowers. Her temples sported stitches, pulling uncomfortably under the bandage. The doctor spoke gently about recovery times, physical therapy, pain management. Ilara nodded numbly, the morphine drip making the world soft around the edges, but unable to dull the persistent throb of her injuries or the sharper sting of indignation. Her son, David, arrived, his face pale with worry. "Mom! Oh, God, Mom!" He hovered, a comforting, familiar presence, handling the insurance forms the officer had brought, talking to the doctors. Ilara watched him, her heart swelling with love, but a part of her retreated behind a wall of ice. This was her burden, her fight. David had his own life, his own stresses. At home, her cozy cottage felt alien. The sling immobilizing her left arm was a constant, cumbersome reminder. Simple tasks, making tea, getting dressed, even turning a page in a book, became arduous challenges. Pain was her constant companion, a grinding ache that stole her sleep and her peace. The insurance adjuster was polite but skeptical, hinting it might be a he said, she said situation without independent witnesses. The police report listed the truckman. His name was revealed as Marcus Thorne, as stating Ilara had been driving erratically and failed to yield. His insurance company echoed this narrative, offering a lowball settlement that wouldn't cover her medical deductibles, let alone the car repairs or the physical therapy she'd need. The frustration was suffocating. She felt erased, invisible, just a little old lady who shouldn't be driving anyway. Marcus Thorne's dismissive face, his muttered insult, haunted her. He'd walked away from the scene without a scratch, probably already forgetting her existence. Meanwhile, her life was upended. One afternoon, sitting stiffly in her favorite armchair, a cup of lukewarm tea beside her, Ilara stared out at her neglected garden. Weeds were encroaching on her precious roses. The thought of trying to prune them with one arm was laughable. Helplessness threatened to drown her. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and useless. Then she remembered the cold shard, the vow, sweet revenge. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a lifeline, a purpose. She couldn't physically fight Thorn. She couldn't shout him down, but she could think. She was Ilara Henderson, who had catalogued entire libraries, solved cryptic crosswords that baffled younger minds, navigated complex university bureaucracy for decades. She possessed patience, observation skills honed over a lifetime, and a quiet persistence that could wear down granite. Revenge wouldn't be a hammer blow. It would be water, dripping slowly, persistently, eroding the foundations of Marcus Thorne's comfortable arrogance. The seed took root. She needed information. She needed leverage. She needed to understand her enemy. Chapter 3. The reconnaissance begins. The first step was Marcus Thorne himself. The police report gave his name and address, a rural root box number outside town, near the newer, sprawling developments favored by those who liked big trucks and bigger lawns. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ilara's physical limitations were a problem. Driving was out of the question for weeks. David offered to drive her anywhere, but involving him felt wrong. This was her path. Then inspiration struck. Mildred. Mildred Perkins, 72, was Ilara's oldest friend. Sharp as a tack, fiercely independent, and blessed with a Subaru Forester, she drove with the confidence of a Formula One racer. More importantly, Mildred had a deep-seated loathing for arrogant drivers and a love of intrigue. "Tea, dear?" Ilara asked when Mildred arrived, bearing casseroles and indignation about the accident. Later, Mildred waved a dismissive hand, settling into the armchair opposite Ilara. "Tell me everything, and don't leave out the bastard's name." Ilara did, including the insurance runaround and Thorne's address. She watched Mildred's eyes narrow, a familiar spark of mischief igniting. "You thinking what I'm thinking, Ellie?" Mildred asked, leaning forward conspiratorially. "I'm thinking," Ilara said slowly, "that Mr. Thorne needs to be understood before any adjustments can be made to his worldview." She met Mildred's gaze. "I can't drive, but you can, and you have binoculars." Mildred's grin was feral. "Consider me your chauffeur and chief reconnaissance officer. Operation Thorne Removal commences tomorrow." The next day, fortified by Mildred's surprisingly strong coffee, they set off. Mildred drove with exaggerated caution past Thorne's address. It was a large, modern house on a sizable plot of land, flanked by similar McMansions. The black pickup, with a noticeable but repaired dent on the rear bumper, sat arrogantly in the driveway. It was spotless, gleaming under the morning sun like a predatory insect. "Obsession with appearances," Mildred muttered, scribbling notes on a pad. "Big house, bigger truck. Compensating for something, you ask me." They parked discreetly down the road under the shade of an oak tree. Mildred produced powerful bird-watching binoculars. For an hour, they observed. A woman emerged, loading groceries into a sleek SUV, probably Mrs. Thorne. Two teenage boys, sullen-looking, slouched out and got into an older, less pristine sedan. Marcus Thorne himself appeared later, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt that strained over his muscles. He climbed into the truck and roared off. "Office job?" Mildred mused. "Doesn't look like construction. Too clean." Over the next week, Mildred became Ilara's eyes and ears. She discovered Thorne worked at Summit Building Supplies, a large hardware and lumber yard on the outskirts of town. He wasn't a laborer. He was a mid-level manager overseeing the lumber department. Mildred, posing as a customer looking for rare teak, inspired by a home renovation show, confirmed his position and observed him interacting with staff and customers. He was brusque, impatient, barking orders. He clearly enjoyed the small measure of power his position afforded him. Mildred also unearthed social media, a goldmine Ilara had largely ignored. With Ilara dictating, Mildred navigated the strange world of Facebook. Marcus Thorne's profile was surprisingly public. It was a shrine to his truck, multiple photos, lovingly captioned, hunting trips, posing with dead deer, fishing, and gym selfies showcasing his biceps. Political rants were frequent, often laced with crude generalizations and a palpable sense of grievance. Comments from friends echoed his bravado and anger. His wife, Cynthia, had a profile filled with carefully curated family photos and aspirational quotes. The teenage sons' profiles were typical teenage angst and gaming references. "Look at this," Mildred pointed at the screen during one session. A photo from a company picnic at Summit. Thorne, red-faced and grinning, held a trophy, annual cornhole champion. Another photo showed him arm-wrestling a colleague, veins bulging in his neck. "Competitive," Mildred noted. "Needs to win. Needs to be the alpha." Ilara absorbed it all. Marcus Thorne, insecure beneath the muscle, obsessed with image, craved dominance, thin-skinned, prone to anger, deeply invested in his perceived status, especially at work and online. His online presence was his curated kingdom, his truck and physique, his armor. His job was a source of authority he clearly relished. These weren't just facts. They were pressure points. The icy shard within Ilara felt colder, sharper. She knew her battlefield now. The revenge wouldn't target his body. It would target his ego, his reputation, the fragile edifice of his self-importance. It would be a meticulously composed symphony of humiliation, played in a key only he could fully hear. The overture was over. The first movement was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Anonymous Tip Summit Building. Supplies was a sprawling complex, warehouse, lumberyard, showrooms. Ilara needed to understand its internal dynamics, its vulnerabilities. Specifically, Thorne's vulnerabilities within the system. She needed someone on the inside. Her gaze fell on the local community forum on her laptop. Among the lost pet notices and bake sale ads, there were occasional rants about local businesses. She found one, dated a few months back, complaining bitterly about Summit's lumber delivery service. The poster, Honest Hammer, described rude drivers, damaged goods, and unresponsive management. The tone was frustrated but detailed, not just a blind rant. Ilara created a new anonymous email account. She crafted a message to Honest Hammer, expressing sympathy for their experience and hinting she had similar concerns about a specific manager. She asked if they had any insights into how things really worked at Summit, particularly the lumber department. A reply arrived surprisingly quickly. Honest Hammer identified himself as Ben, a former Summit delivery driver. He'd quit after repeated clashes with Marcus Thorne. Ben painted a vivid picture. Thorne was a bully, cutting corners on safety protocols to meet unrealistic delivery quotas he set himself, blaming drivers for delays caused by his poor scheduling, taking credit for their successes, and creating a toxic atmosphere. He hinted at Thorne occasionally losing paperwork for returns, potentially skimming small amounts or covering mistakes. Nothing provably illegal, Ben stressed, just shady, unethical, and demoralizing. He also mentioned Thorne had a fierce rivalry with the head of the plumbing department, a woman named Sharon Pike, whom he constantly undermined. This was valuable. Thorne wasn't just disliked. His management style created friction and potential liabilities. Ilara carefully stored Ben's information, promising anonymity. Her next move required precision. She needed to plant a seed of doubt about Thorne within Summit's management, something subtle that would trigger internal scrutiny, something that played on his known behaviors. Using the public company directory, she found the email format for Summit executives. She crafted another anonymous email, this time to the head of human resources and the regional manager. It was brief, professional, and chillingly vague. Subject: concern regarding safety inventory, practices, lumber depth. Dear HR Department Regional Management, I am writing anonymously out of concern for potential issues within the lumber department at your Summit location, managed by Mr. Marcus Thorne. While I cannot provide specific evidence at this time, for fear of reprisal, I have observed and heard concerning accounts regarding